When you read the Bible, who's the hero of the story? Today we're talking about the biggest mistake that people make when they first start studying Scripture. If you're new here, my name is Danielle, and everything I do here is designed to help us become more firmly planted in truth. All right, so I think the biggest mistake that people make when they first start studying Scripture is looking for yourself as the hero. So let me kind of explain what I'm talking about here. When we read any kind of book, fiction, biblical narrative, whatever, we often put ourselves as the hero of the story. Even when we're watching movies, we do that, we see ourselves as the hero. And it's just kind of one of our natural tendencies. But when we read Scripture and we do it, this can actually become a problem. And we do this because we're tempted to see ourselves everywhere. I heard somebody talk about it in like a photograph sense. So if you're looking at a picture that was just taken, everybody's standing around there, you look at the picture, do you automatically look for yourself to see what you look like in the picture, or do you look at what your friends look like in the picture? So anyway, we just naturally kind of look for ourselves in pretty much everything that we do. So let's talk about why this is actually a problem when we're reading Scripture. So first up, it might distort what's actually going on in the story. When we are trying to figure out automatically, like, how does this apply to me? How do I become the hero of this story? We might actually miss the big picture of what's going on. A lot of times it can also give us the wrong application, or maybe if it's not a wrong application, it may just be a poor application. Because if I see myself as the hero, I might take something from that story that was never meant to be taken from it. If you've been enjoying this video so far, if you wouldn't mind going ahead and giving me a like and subscribe, that will really help this channel to grow. I thought I would give us a few really common examples of when this happens. So the first example, which I think is by far the most common, is the story of David and Goliath. If you're not familiar with that story, just a quick synopsis. David is a shepherd boy, and he goes to the front lines of what would be a battle, and then there's this giant named Goliath, and he is taunting the Israelites, and no one wants to stand up to Goliath. They're saying, bring out your best warrior, we'll just have our best warriors fight, and whoever wins, wins. And David is like, why isn't anyone fighting? I'll just do it. And so he steps in, he fights Goliath, he takes him down with a slingshot. David beats Goliath. So that's a really common story. But often when we look at that story, when we read that story, we're like, oh, I want to be David. I want to be David who, and maybe we have good intentions by saying, I want to be David who trusts in the Lord and goes after all of my giants in life. And so it's not that that's necessarily bad, like we have what we would call giants in our life that we may need to take down. So it's not necessarily like terrible. It's just not the main point of the story. What we miss in this story is who the hero actually is, and that is God. And this story actually points us to Jesus. Because in Scripture, every prophet, every priest, and every king is pointing to Jesus in some way. And David, who will soon be king, this story is no different. So we miss this character of God who is there to deliver his people, and we miss the pointing to of Jesus who's going to come later. Like David in this moment is a picture, a shadow of Jesus, where Jesus defeats sin and death, which is Goliath. And in reality, who we are in this story, if you want to put a character on it, we're the terrified Israelites that are standing around watching what's happening. If we want to be in the story, we're the Israelites. All right, another famous example of this is during the Exodus. So if you're not familiar with this story, this is when Moses comes on the scene and he is to deliver God's people, the Israelites, out of the hands of the Egyptians. There were plagues that came down that God sends. And then after the 10th plague, the Israelites are allowed to leave. But Pharaoh's army is chasing them down. Moses parts the Red Sea, and God's people are able to walk across on dry land. The waters come back and take out the Egyptian army. Okay, so often when we see that, we see, oh, God is going to deliver me from all of my circumstances. What's going on in my life? Just like he did with the Israelites, just like he did with Moses, God is going to deliver me. So when we do this, we're missing the whole point of the story. There is a theme all throughout Scripture about rescue. And this story is one of the, I would say maybe even a turning point in Scripture about God's deliverance. Yes, God's rescuing of his people, absolutely. But it's not because of circumstance, right? This whole theme of deliverance and rescue is about Jesus, who came to earth on a rescue mission to deliver us from sin and death. He is the hero of the story yet again. We miss that God is a covenant-keeping God, that what he promised Abraham long ago hasn't gone away. He is going to deliver his people. He's going to save his people from the oppression of the Egyptians. We see in this story that God is sovereign, that nothing is out of his control. He knows exactly what's going on. He knows what Pharaoh's going to do. He already had this plan in place of exactly what was going to happen. So we can see this beautiful picture of the character of God on full display in this story. And another thing that we see is God saves the undeserving. The Israelites did not deserve the saving that they received. They were complainers. They didn't trust in God. And here we see God reaching down and rescuing his people. So when we see the story of David and Goliath and we see the story of the Exodus, this should bring our hearts to a place of wanting to worship God. We can see that, we serve a God who is mighty. We serve a God who is sovereign. We serve a God who is faithful to his promises. And that should lead our hearts to worship. When we see a story where we're the hero, we don't need to worship. We don't need to bring ourselves in humility before the Lord. Because we're the hero. So how do we practice doing this? This is why I tell you guys to look for the character of God in the story. What is happening? What is God doing? And do you see any reflections of how Jesus did those things for us as well? Because sometimes those things will point to Jesus. So ask those questions, look for those things in Scripture. And what did it mean to the original audience? I think that that's a really important question that we have to ask. Were they, in that moment of David and Goliath, were they saying, I'm like David, I'm the hero of the story? No, they were saying, wow, look what God did through a shepherd. Then after you've seen the character of God, after you've seen how it points to Jesus, after you've seen how the original audience would have understood the story, then we can ask ourselves, how does that apply to us? In these two stories that I've talked about today, I think it can only bring us to worship. So I want to leave you today with a little bit of encouragement. We have all done this in Scripture. We have all put ourselves in the hero's shoes. We have looked for things that maybe we were missing the point of the story. That's okay. Keep going. Keep trying. Keep looking for the character of God. Pray that God would help you with understanding as you read through Scripture. I know a lot of you have started new Bible plans from the beginning of the year. And so I'm inviting you to just look for the character of God over and over and over in Scripture, because remember, this is a story about him. It's not about us. And don't worry about being perfect at this. Again, I've said this before, it takes practice to do this, but try for faithfulness, because that's really what it's all about. This is all about us getting to know God more and becoming more like Jesus. If you wouldn't mind, in the comments below, leave me a note about the character of God that you've been seeing recently in your study. Maybe something that stood out to you more than it has before, or something you're learning about God. I would really love to engage with that with you. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.